As we began the class, I wanted you to take on a view to try to view the events through the eyes of a security person, through the eyes of an investigator, and through the eyes of someone who would have planned an assassination. Just so that you could take a different view of the events and maybe see that they could fit into a scenario that is different than the one given to us by the Warren Commission. So today, I just want to show you a couple of more videos, and then I want to review from the standpoint of an assassination, what was an assassination team, what was the objective, and post-event, how do we evaluate, did we do well or didn't we? And then we'll open up for discussion. So let's just start with this first video.
1,000 miles away from Dallas, at a restaurant in Tampa, a celebration is underway. Mobster Santo Trafficante raises his glass and toasts the assassination of John F. Kennedy. For Mafia Don Carlos Marcello in New Orleans, and for Johnny Rosselli in Chicago, it is also welcome news. The president's death marks the end of Bobby Kennedy's crusade against them, a relentless campaign that resulted in 12 times more cases brought against organized crime than ever before.
As Carlos Marcello explained it, if you cut off the tail of the dog, kill Bobby Kennedy, the head of the dog, JFK, will turn around and bite you. However, if you cut off the head of the dog, you kill JFK, the tail of the dog stops wagging on its own.
Whispers of a mafia hit on the president begin to circulate almost immediately. The mob's hatred of the Kennedy family is no secret.
We have organized crime and some big gangsters and hoodlums.
The strongest motive for murder is self-defense. And in the case of the Mafia, I'm sure they viewed this as self-defense.
After JFK was buried, Bobby was literally a shattered man, a shell of what he had been. All the Mafia prosecutions were scaled back.
It's a dangerous game Bobby's been playing, going after powerful gangsters, while his family has its own tangled relationship with them. From his father's bootlegging days to JFK's relationship with a godfather's girlfriend. But it's another connection to the mob that would bring down the president.
There was a deal to use the Mafia to get rid of Castro.
For years, the CIA had enlisted the Mafia's help to overthrow Castro.
Can you refresh your recollection at all?
The Kennedy administration's crusade against the mob back home is a slap in the face, a betrayal. It's the final straw. In the summer of 1963, those twisted links among Cuba, the CIA, and the mob become the foundations of a plot to kill Kennedy. But an unwitting decision by the Kennedys themselves is the catalyst. After countless failed attempts by the CIA to remove or kill Castro, like the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, the Kennedy brothers come up with their own plan to eliminate Castro once and for all.
JFK was faced with a quandary of how could he deal with this Cuban situation before the '64 campaign really kicked off, early in 1964.
Few administration officials ever learn of the plan. Among them, Secretary of State Dean Rusk.
We were quite surprised when he told us that John and Robert Kennedy were getting ready to stage a coup against Fidel Castro.
But it's a CIA memo dated June 28, 1963, that lays out the covert operation in black and white. Code name AM World. Kubark is code for the CIA, P. Bruman, Cuba, and Odioke, the Kennedys.
They echo the wording of Mission Impossible, the old TV show from the '60s, where the government says these groups have to be based outside the continental United States, but that if the United States is ever charged with complicity, the United States will publicly deny any knowledge of these folks' operations.
This once top-secret CIA document reveals the date of the scheduled coup, December 1st, 1963. It's only months away. Bobby Kennedy takes great pains to keep the president from being directly connected to AM World. Bobby himself meets with Cuban exile leaders to plan the overthrow.
This was something that was being very tightly controlled by Bobby. He was trying to run it in a way that it wouldn't become an open secret like the Bay of Pigs Head.
There's little doubt that Bobby's running the show. But what Bobby doesn't realize is that AM World isn't the only show in town. Even as the CIA assigns operatives to the Kennedy's coup plan. Unknown to the brothers, the agency is still secretly working with the Mafia to kill Castro.
These plots, of course, range from the sublime to the ridiculous, like exploding cigars and depilatories and everything else. But then there were also some serious consideration given to assassination attempts, etc., etc.
It's a mutually satisfying arrangement for both. The mob has much desired connections to the Cuban underworld, while the CIA turns a blind eye to the Mafia's profitable gambling, arms sales, and drug rings there.
The CIA Mafia plots we now know existed to assassinate Fidel Castro were carried out without the knowledge or without the approval of President Kennedy.
Directing the mob contingent, none other than Santo Trafficante, Johnny Rosselli, and Carlos Marcello. It's only a matter of time before they get wind of the Kennedy coup plan through their CIA contacts. By July 1963, 6 mob associates infiltrate the plan. The CIA has no idea that their Mafia collaborators are now players in the president's covert operation. Waldron and Hartman believe they have uncovered the evidence to prove this chain of events really happened.
We even have smoking gun documents from the CIA that clearly show where a key Cuban exile leader, in this case Tony Verona, was paid $200,000 by Rosselli's Chicago Mafia in the summer of 1963.
But the Mafia realizes it's in prime position for something no one dared consider before. Under the protection of the CIA, in the shadows of a secret coup plan, a presidential assassination plot is born.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound.
Okay, let me stop that share. Okay, this one. Come on, there we go. And back to here. Now I want you to, I want to share with you a video that the attempted assassination on Kennedy.
It would be impossible to thoroughly...
Come on.
The date set for the Kennedy's coup.
That the attack in Dallas was preceded by other attempted assassinations.
The perfect scenario. A public place, a tall structure, and an open motorcade. In November 1963, the opportunity presents itself. Not once, but 3 times.
Not only was there a likely conspiracy in Dallas to kill the president, but earlier in Tampa, Florida, and even before that in Chicago.
Mafia sharpshooters would take out the president, but the mob needs someone else to take the fall.
The reason that these 3 godfathers wanted to have a patsy involved in each one of the 3 attempts against John Kennedy in that roughly 2.5-week period there was that they wanted instantly for the attention or for the suspicion to be diverted away from them and toward Cuba.
Through their CIA and law enforcement connections, the mob learns about the men in each city most likely to arouse government suspicion, even be arrested after the president is killed. In Dallas, there's no better fall guy than Lee Harvey Oswald. In Tampa, another pro-Castro supporter, Gilberto Lopez. And in Chicago, a gun-loving ex-Marine, Thomas Arthur Valley.
There was also a Cuba connection. In Valley's background, he had recently been training anti-Castro Cubans.
But only 3 days before the president's visit to Chicago, the mob loses its patsy there. Valley is caught during a traffic stop with a trunkload of rifles and ammunition. He's arrested, questioned, but never charged. The same day, there's another fatal blow to the mob's Chicago plan. Someone tips off the FBI that a team of hitmen is there trying to assassinate the president.
There were supposed to have been 4 men in this particular conspiracy.
Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden is on detail in Chicago when the FBI contacts the field office there about the plan to kill the president. What happens next shocks Bolden.
We were told no paper trail, that all of the files, notebooks, anything pertaining to that particular case had to be turned in to the special agent in charge, and we were told that case never existed.
Kennedy's trip to Chicago is called off at the last minute. The official reason? The president needs to deal with a situation in Vietnam.
This cancellation was so sudden, people were already starting to line up along the motorcade route, but the Kennedys were able to keep a lid on this threat, and so it didn't reach the press at that time.
The assassination threat is never made public. Agent Bolden later tries to contact the Warren Commission on his own. He knows his superiors will be furious.
I think the Secret Service wanted to give one story, and they didn't want to have any conflict by what that they were officially telling the Warren Commission.
But days before he's to testify, Bolden is arrested. He's later convicted for bribery and solicitation on an unrelated counterfeit case. He spends 3 years in jail.
We've gathered a fairly abundant collection of evidence that Bolden was framed, and here's a guy who was really one of the people doing a great and noble job and thought he had information that was really going to help, and for this, his life is destroyed.
Why isn't there any mention of this Chicago assassination attempt in the Warren Commission report?
It does show how secret those attempts were, and that the secrecy surrounding those attempts were linked to national security concerns related to the coup plan.
Although the Mafia chiefs are frustrated that their first attempt is foiled, the hasty cover-up of the threat gives them confidence to move forward with another assassination attempt only a few weeks later.
And I want you to hear from one of the Parkland doctors one more time. There we go.
Before they roll that film, and as we sat there, we saw the motorcade turning off onto Elm Street and coming down toward the triple underpass and coming down slowly toward that. And as he approached the triple underpass, he was all of a sudden, earlier, was hit in the back, and he raised his hands to his neck like that. And I think that's when the first bullet that hit him came in the back and came out his neck, and his hands went to his neck. And then the motorcade slowly moved down toward the triple underpass, and as they got, a moment or two later, Mrs. Kennedy realized that something was wrong, and she leaned over to him as if to say, what's the matter? And as she did that, the bullet struck him in the front, which I think may have very likely been fired from the picket fence in front of the president's motorcade. and caused the fatal wound, blew out the back of his head and the black part of his brain, the back part of his cerebrum and cerebellum.
Okay, and so as I contemplate this from the standpoint of an assassination, a sophisticated assassination, what were the key objectives? Key objectives was to kill the target and protect the conspiracy hierarchy, the very powerful people who would have authorized, initiated this assassination. And mind you, in my view, I don't put the Mafia up there. The Mafia wouldn't rise to that level. It would be people of much greater power. And that the objective to do that is to suppress the investigation and to quickly get to the point where you can say case closed. And so we want to kill the target. And what I suggested earlier was that you would look for triangulation, that you would pick 3 positions to put shooters in when you can ambush the target and you're hitting the target from 3 different angles to ensure that you kill the target. And I'm suggesting that Kennedy is shot in the throat from the front, he's shot in the back from the rear, and he is shot in the head on the right front from the right side of the motorcade. And these are the autopsy photos. That's the throat wound. That's the wound in the back. Dr. McClellan says that's the same wound, that the throat is an exit. There are other emergency room doctors who say the throat wound was an entry wound. And that's the head. And so the objectives of the assassination team were then to leverage pressure on the police to make an arrest. We know the Dallas police want desperately to show that they are in control and they want to have a suspect quickly. As they go about doing their investigation, we want to throw chaos into the mix so that the pressure goes up exponentially. And what we do is we have a police officer killed. We then provide a suspect, which include in providing the suspect the implicating evidence. We have an easily found weapon. We have a receipt of the purchase of the weapon by the suspect. We have a photo of the suspect with the weapon in his backyard. And we have a palm print. Mind you, when the weapon was retrieved after the shooting, it was dusted for prints. None were found. A palm print, however, emerges after the suspect is killed and after the police visit the funeral home where the suspect remains are being held. And so our next objective is to kill the suspect. Again, we handed you one. Now when he's dead, no need for any more investigation. And we also want to kill the suspect's killer. Case closed. FBI report is concluded within 2 weeks, followed up by validation by the Warren Commission. From an investigative standpoint, the investigation is cut short. I feel that under the circumstances, someone needed to demand that this be investigated thoroughly, that it was clearly a sophisticated assassination. Anyone who's investigated things and evidence simply is placed in front of you knows you're being played. But quickly the pressure was on to get to the point of case closed. From the security standpoint, after having two attempts to not have identified that Dealey Plaza was the perfect spot for an ambush is incompetent from my perspective. Okay, with that, Lauren, we can open up for comments, discussion. That's all I wanted to present to you today. So it's more for, this class is really for people in the class to speak, not me, so.
Okay, we can, everybody can put on your videos again, and you can use the raise the hand function, which many people will find down in reactions, to ask your questions. And after an earth-shattering, series like that, I'm sure that everybody has some questions for Sal, because he has even more research that he's done beyond what he has presented here to you in these last few weeks. So, who's first? I think they're afraid, Sal.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, let me just say,
actually, Sal,
yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Some of us were in the other class, so we missed your first few minutes. Could you give a really quick summary of the first few minutes?
Yeah, it was just I was showing a video of organized crime that when Kennedy was killed about 1,000 miles away, Trafficante was toasting the murder of Kennedy, and it just went into the CIA relations with organized crime and that sort of thing. Yeah. And let me say what I wanted to do in this, as I've said before, I don't know who killed Kennedy. I only wanted really to share the perspective of someone who came from the security world and how I would relate to the events, what evidence we do have that it fits a scenario other than the one we were given by the Warren Commission. Yeah, Nina, go ahead. Oh, Lauren, if you can unmute.
I will. I did it. Are we good?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay, hi. Well, I'm sure that I can speak for everybody in this class when I say that this class has been mind-bogglingly eye-opening for sure. And it's just so impressive the way that you pulled together so many disparate sources and made your case, as a securities analyst. I had no idea about any of this. But what I'd like to find out from you, your opinion, clearly, regardless of who set up this assassination, there were motivations to kill Kennedy. I'm assuming because he was taking things in a certain direction, and whomever did this wanted to change the trajectory of history, right? We have the advantage now of hindsight. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about how successful was whoever shot him in actually making the changes that they hoped to make. In other words, when Johnson stepped in, were many of the same policies put into place anyway, or did things dramatically change because of the elimination of Kennedy and then the second Kennedy as well? Just your thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to put it in the perspective of how I look at American history, of really going back to the thousands of years to look at how the human experience has evolved, and what's important is that really over the past 10,000 years, we as a species became we embraced the ideas of wealth, power, and greed. And when you look at what occurred over the past 4,000 to 5,000 years, it was greed on steroids. We started building empires, and the brutality that was unleashed was horrific, beyond what we had known over our 200,000-year existence. And so this phenomenon of I need wealth, power, driven by greed at any cost, if it meant enslaving people, murdering people, raping people, poisoning the air, poisoning the water. This is a phenomenon that has occurred over thousands of years. And when you see people with power who have no guardrails, no moral constraint, no legal constraint, anything that threatens them that is in opposition, their answer is to kill it.
Right.
And what you have is America is coming to a point in the 1960s where its racial past is right up in its face. And the people who benefited from racial animus were not about to let it go. Now, mind you, I've said many times, I don't believe the problem is racism. I think racism is but a tool for the people of great wealth and power. But if you're going to do something to threaten that, take away that tool, they were going to do everything in their power to fight back. They lynched people across the South to get them under control. People who were leading president, they shot them in the back. They did all kinds of horrific terrorism beyond anything you can imagine. And so this is what happens is John Kennedy is talking about civil rights. He's also talking about not wanting to engage the communist. This is a threat to them. And so, as they did with any other threat before them, they simply killed it. Now, I think that they also thought that Lyndon Johnson, who had his bona fides were very strong as a racist. And but you know, if you listen to the political conventions of the 1930s, 1940s, particularly the Democratic Party, this is virulent racism. This was, I mean, there was no dog whistle. This was right. They were explicit. And Lyndon Johnson voted against all civil rights bills. So they thought they had their person. And then he gets in office, and what does he do? He passes a civil rights bill, and he passes a voting rights bill. Now, mind you, you would think, okay, that was accomplished. It has taken 60 years since then, but they haven't given up. They now are crushing the voting rights bill. They're looking to crush the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the Constitution. These powerful forces, they are using race is the heart of where they are today. So what you get is that Kennedy was just one blip on a long list of things that are being, they do not want to let go of that path. Just as Putin is now looking to go back to 1991. We've been looking to go back to 1861. And so the murder of Kennedy is just one iteration. And it's important really to see the broad picture forces that come to bear that make this happen. And it takes people with that amount of power to have pulled off what is clearly a sophisticated assassination.
Right. So I think that I appreciate everything you've just said, and clearly it's become really clear that this is one more blip in that trajectory that you've talked about. But what your class did for me was heighten my awareness of the connection between the CIA and the Mafia in Cuba specifically. And I think I'd like to hear more about that aspect of it. Like, yeah, there's wealth and power. Castro was coming into power. He was going to socialize or communize the country. What impact was that going to have on all the business that the Mafia was conducting in Cuba? Like, what is that angle about? And how much did that play into the decision to assassinate Kennedy? And then ultimately, what impact did his disappearance have on that?
Well, it's important to understand that in Cuba, I mean, Cuba was a part of the European invasion of the Americas, and it was a sugar plantation.
Right.
And it was populated by enslaved people. And so this was an oppressed, just another island in the Greater and Lesser Antilles that was torturous. And so by the time the government before Castro was Batista. So before Castro, the Batista government was one that was a strong arm, part of the protective edifice, protecting the interest of the sugar plantation people. And they were producing rum. The Mafia becomes involved during Prohibition of getting rum out of Cuba. And so it's part of trying, that's where they're smuggling. And those relationships become formed. And then they see an opportunity. Yes, Prohibition is over, but we now have a relationship. So what can we do with it? Well, the mob says, casinos, prostitution, all that stuff. So Havana becomes the playground for organized crime. Batista gets very rich as a part of it. The Cuban people are simply a brothel. And so along comes Castro, and he overthrows it. Well, when he overthrows it, who's he overthrowing? Organized crime. So, and mind you, when he comes into power, he's not really, it's not certain that he wants to form a communist government or socialist government. He just wants a new government. But then America turns against him, so he gets driven into the arms of the Soviets for help. And so, what organized crime lost in Havana was monumental. They made a fortune of money there, and Americans would flood into Havana because you could gamble, prostitution, all of that. This was I
guess what's confusing to me, Sal, is it sounds like the Mafia would have been very invested in eliminating Castro. And that's what was one of Kennedy's aims. So that's the part that's confusing.
Well, remember, what happens is there is a plan constructed to overthrow the Castro government during the Eisenhower administration that was created by Richard Nixon. And Nixon loses the election by a very narrow margin. And Jack Kennedy gets in. Now, Jack Kennedy wasn't involved in that original planning. So he gets presented with the Bay of Pigs invasion. And he says, okay, I'll let you go ahead, but no American involvement. Mind you, we're involved in the Organization of American States. So we have agreements that we're not going to attack these other countries. And so he feels constrained by it. So he blocks US involvement, military involvement in the Bay of Pigs invasion, which doomed it to failure. It fails. And what does Kennedy do? He fires Allen Dulles, a key link between the CIA and organized crime. This was anathema to these guys. This was
That's the key thing right there. Okay. Now it makes sense. Okay.
Hey,
Thank
Sal,
you.
I'm gonna jump in here and ask a question for Nita, who's having some audio, audio issues right now. She wants to know, what did Jackie think? Has she ever commented? She thinks that maybe Jackie left the country to protect her kids and was just wondering what she knew.
And I don't know. I don't know of any public statements out of her. It's my dog. She didn't like that either. And so, I don't know. She really wanted to protect her children and get out of the limelight. And so she kind of goes into exile. Yeah.
Gretchen.
You may have covered this, Sal, at some point, but I wondered whether Oswald knew what was going to happen to him. Was he a part of the whole overall plot? Did he know he was going to be assassinated himself?
No, again, I'm looking at it from, a security if I was putting together this assassination, the person I handed over as a suspect would know nothing about it. And the reason I would want him to know nothing about it is that while he's being interrogated by police, he has no knowledge to pass on to them. It is, I would pluck him out of nowhere but I would have set him up. I would have gotten all the parts and pieces in place. And mind you, the people in Chicago and the people in Tampa, they had other Lee Harvey Oswalds who were there who could have been the suspect they would have given up. So, I don't know. I'm just giving you my best guess. But I think he totally had nothing to do with it. And as that day is going on and he's being interrogated, it finally occurs to him he's been set up as a patsy. And he's to me, he is acting like a guy who's been trained as to what to do if you get arrested by the police, what to say, what not to say. And he's following what he was trained to do. And then it occurs to him, I am a patsy. He's a smart guy. So it finally would have occurred to him. And so I would even guess that, it made the need to kill him when he said, I'm a patsy, it escalated the need for him to get killed.
So he probably knew at that point that he was going to be killed. One way or the other.
I would think that was running through his head.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's just such a shocking. I mean, I never heard of any of this. I never thought about any of this before. No, so it's a very good class.
No, thank you. But that's it, and that is many people. We certainly were bombarded with Lee Harvey Oswald did it. We got the gun. We got this. We got pictures of him. All of that kind of stuff. Again, from the lay position, you would say, okay, that makes sense. Okay, they got the guy who did it and he got killed, so no need to keep investigating, and it's a moot point. But from my perspective, it was, are you guys kidding? This is a setup. I can tell when evidence has been left for me to go and find. And my suspicion then is, who's setting this up? And I mean, you see, it's not like that is unusual. There's, it is, but again, when you get into a lot of investigations, it becomes, I don't like when anybody is laying breadcrumbs for me to go and find stuff. That means there's a setup going on here. And the idea that Oswald had nothing to do with it is one that, you know, is for many people, that can't be, or he wouldn't have been there, or any of that. So, yeah.
I wonder if the United States, if this knowledge that you have been talking to us about, will that ever become public? Or how many more years will it take?
Well, again, because there wasn't an investigation back then, there's no evidence that you can use as a foundation for developing a substantive theory that you can then prove. Again, what I'm saying is purely speculative and, questions. But because we don't have evidence from that point in time. That's why what I said, if I was putting together a security plan before the event, I would have had protocols in place that if the president is killed, we're going to create a 1 mile square, a crime scene, and no one's going in and no one's going out unless we've interviewed them. And I would go over everything with a fine tooth comb, and there would be no air travel. There would be no private airports. There would be nothing would move. That would be a part of the plan, because you have to get the evidence then. If you don't, it's lost.
But
And that
even
wasn't
the
done.
evidence we did get doesn't even add up, like where the bullet holes were and stuff. That,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
what
It's
we've seen in
inconsistent.
pictures is just not what was presented in the report. That's,
Right.
it's crazy. Hey,
Thank you.
Bill Fisher.
Bill, can you unmute? There you go.
Okay. Sal, by the way, this was a really great class, and I've enjoyed it tremendously. In terms, Nina, I think, asked a question, what changed history on it? I would argue that there were two areas that somebody was really upset about. One was civil rights, as you brought up. Although I would correct one thing, the first civil rights bill passed since Reconstruction happened in 1957. Lyndon Johnson actually helped that get through the Senate, although it wasn't, it set up a civil rights division and civil rights commission, but it was something. The other vector was Vietnam. And Kennedy had issued a national security memorandum number 263 on October the 11th, 1963, a little over 5 weeks before. And it said, we're going to withdraw 1,000 American troops by the end of 1963 with the intent of having all American troops out of Vietnam by 1965. Now, on the civil rights front, turned out Johnson, and actually the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act were passed under Lyndon Johnson, not JFK. And the Kennedy assassination helped accelerate that. So on civil rights, nothing was changed. In fact, if anything, things moved faster in the wrong direction for racists. But on Vietnam, Johnson reversed what seems to be implied by Kennedy's national security memorandum. And someone, I did a class on Vietnam several years back, and I can't find my quote. I have to dig through and find it. But what I found was someone said, and maybe it was General Harold K. Johnson, who was Army Chief of Staff, at some very modest, toned down White House Christmas event, 1963, that Johnson was talking with all the military chiefs, and his comment was, well, you boys got your war now. You need to help me get elected in 1964. My hunch is that next step up that you're talking about was military CIA somewhere. Next step down, the Mafia are the guys who they sort of outsourced it to them. So somewhere in the military CIA, Fletcher Prouty talks about all the black ops stuff and stuff. I think somewhere up that, my hunch is somewhere up there was the Kingpin organization.
the mafia was the contractors in this deal. And then again, it was the military, the CIA, you know, like you brought up Allen Dulles, J. Edgar Hoover, those guys come back in to help do all the cover up and stuff. But you presented this more logically than I've ever seen it done ever. You should have been working back then doing this.
Well, I you know, I'm sure I would have been fired within the first half hour. But
if you were lucky, if you were lucky, yeah.
But you know, to me, any investigator, you know, would have, you know, I mean, the stuff that kind of sets me off is the same stuff that I think would set off any investigator. But yeah, Lyndon Johnson, as the Senate Majority Leader, does negotiate civil rights bills in the 50s, but they are neutered. They're made Southern Democrat friendly. So they've done some kind of window dressing, but that's about it. And what happens is when he gets into office, he's twisting arms to get the civil rights bill and the voting rights bill passed. And he has James Farmer come into his office, and Farmer comes in and sits down while LBJ is on the phone. And so Farmer can hear LBJ twisting arms to get the bill passed. And when he finishes the phone call, Farmer says to him, Mr. President, with all due respect, your record on voting rights has not been very friendly to the Negro. And Johnson replied, and he says, well, I appreciate your asking me about that. And he says, I'm going to answer you in words that I think you'll understand. I'm going to quote a famous man. And he said, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. So Johnson is saying, yeah, that was me yesterday. Today, I'm now free, and I'm going to get civil rights. We're going to accomplish what wasn't accomplished in 1865. So that's a big move. On Vietnam, he talks with Richard Russell, and Russell says, we need to get the hell out of Vietnam. This is the biggest mess I've ever seen. And Russell says, I can get the Vietnamese to ask us to leave. I'll get intelligence to go to the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese will request us to leave. And Johnson said, wouldn't they impeach a president who did that? Meaning the right wing. And Russell says, we can manage that. But Johnson is not going to, and again, this is just speculation, right? I mean, is that I think Johnson, he fights the war in Vietnam to hold off the right wing so he can get civil rights legislation.
Yeah.
And that's the price that he pays, that America pays, so he can get that done. And that's just what my guess. Yeah. And I also want to make sure that I say to everybody, what I'm presenting here is the evidence to support a theory, but it doesn't prove the theory. It's just, that's what it is.
I'm going to jump in here with another question. Fran Ackerman has asked, have you seen the Oliver Stone movie? And if so, what do you think of it?
Yeah, I saw the movie, and you know, I think it does a good job of representing Garrison and the case that he attempted to make. It does carry forth a lot of the themes that I think were presented in this class. It's kind of a little heavy. You know, I never like dramatic depictions of stuff. It just because it becomes, you know, too unrealistic in some cases, but you know, and it tries to present some people as heroes beyond what they were and that sort of thing. But it was good film, good film. Yeah.
Okay, we have Judy next.
Okay. Sal, of course, I've found this fascinating and I appreciate you. And you mentioned some things about the Warren Commission, which started ringing bells. I'm sorry about the January 6th Commission or investigation. And the tendency we have, it seems to me, my opinion, in this country, to have this philosophy of like a Pandora's box where, oh, we don't want to do this because it'll make things rough. It'll have concerns for different parts of the country, and it could be leading to instability. So we're going to just close this box and move on. And of course, it's gotten to me even worse than that now, where not only are we not opening the box, but we're refusing to acknowledge that the box ever existed. So what's your opinion on those kinds of things since the Warren Commission that we've had, when there's any investigation to be done?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that we, look, there's, again, my analysis as a security person is really looking at what are threats to us, what can adversaries use against us to undermine us. And by the way, that was kind of what FDR did before World War II. You know, he said to the Justice Department, I want you to look at America and look at what things our adversaries may be able to use to undermine us. And they came back with a lot of stuff about Jim Crow, believe it or not. And so, yeah, I look at it and I have felt for a very long time that if the racial animus is a cancer and it will destroy America. If you look at what happened on January 6th, it was very much a white nationalist attack. And so this phenomenon of racial animus in America has never been confronted. We've never really addressed it. We've never resolved it. And so, and mind you, I think there are very powerful interests who want to keep racial animus alive and well. They benefit from it. As we talk about race issues, we're not looking at greed issues. So people, and people of greed may not even be racist, but they like to fan it because it keeps attention off of them and it keeps us, you know, wrestling with each other. And for many of the people of great power, if America collapses, it doesn't matter to them. They've got homes in Switzerland and, you know, Tahiti, you know, they're detached from the country in many ways. So yeah, I think, and you know, if you try to really open up, let's really look at the history and where we are and what our interests are. The blowback is fierce. When George Floyd was murdered, the world erupted in demonstrations about it. When that happened, I said, the blowback is going to be severe. And you got it on January 6th. That was blowback to George Floyd. And so we're, again, it's people of great power it's how much money and how much power do you really need? Look at Putin. Putin has more money than he knows what to do with. He has lots of power, but it ain't enough. He has to show he has the power to turn the clock back 30 years. He has to do it. And mind you, part of what he is looking at is that America is in disarray, driven by race. When the Russians interfered in the 2016 election and they were running disinformation campaigns, over half of the information they put out there, the disinformation, was aimed at inflaming white people or inflaming Black people. It was all about racial animus. So they know that America is really on the verge of collapse. We have mutually exclusive position. There's no middle ground. So, he sees this as an opportunity. He sees Brexit work. And by the way, the Russians were involved in disinformation with Brexit. So he was able to drive a wedge in the European Union. He sees a wedge in the United States. This is his opportunity. There'll never be a better time for him to be aggressive than he has right now. Will we hold together? Will be? It's anybody's guess. There's no guarantee. But once you start a war, and when you look at people starting war, what does Russia have to lose right now? Not much. They have oil and gas. That's an industry in decline. If you want to break, shuffle the deck, now's the time to do it. And so, all of these things come to bear. The racial issues impact not just America, but the globe. and it is all founded on make-believe. Mind you, the idea that skin color somehow elevates someone in superiority or inferiority is founded on nothing. It's pure fiction. But it's powerful people have known how to use it, and it has enhanced their power.
So the ID that says Marcy Nader, I'm not sure that you're Marcy, but go ahead.
No, I'm not. Well, I had an operation a few months ago, so, but no, I'm not. I wanted to ask about the assassination of the DM brothers, which happened around November 1st, 1963, which most people say the United States did, and how that, we probably did it under the approval of President Kennedy. I don't know if it was or not, but how do you think that impacted his assassination? Of course, DM's wife said that the chickens were going to come home to roost and that the Kennedy brothers would be assassinated.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. You're right. DM is killed just 2 weeks or so before Kennedy is killed, and mind you, what you had is, in 1945, when Japan surrendered, intelligence people were sent into Hanoi to gather information about, they were sent to retrieve prisoners of war who had been held by the Japanese in Vietnam, American prisoners of war.
Right.
And they were to develop intelligence that would inform policy. One of the people was Peter Dewey, Colonel Peter Dewey, from the Office of Strategic Services, who was really expert in Southeast Asia. The British were assigned to oversee Vietnam post World War II until they could, the dust would settle and the winning
Give it to the
power
French back.
decide what to do. And so Colonel Dewey goes in, and like within a week, he reports back. He says, the French are done in Vietnam. And we need to support Ho Chi Minh, and we need to keep our nose really out of Vietnam. It's over for the French. And Ho Chi Minh was considered by the Office of Strategic Services as our greatest supporter in Southeast Asia.
Right, yeah, I know.
They helped retrieve American pilots and bring them back. Right. So, we wind up, and Colonel Dewey, by the way, angers the British by saying what he said, because the British want to reconstitute their empire. Right. And so they want the French to reconstitute theirs. And so they call for Dewey to be recalled. And Dewey is going back shortly thereafter, and he is killed on his way to the airport.
Oh,
we never retrieved his remains, by the way. But his assessment then was correct, and it remained correct through the entire war. So America is bogged down in Vietnam, doesn't know what it wants to do. There are forces, the anti-communist, and mind you, anti-communism is driven by who? The powers. Right. In my other history class, we talk about what's the root of communism. It was common lands that became enclosed. And so the people who were kicked off of those lands became the communist. And that's where it has its genesis. By the way, those who were kicked off those lands in Scotland and Ireland and Wales, they populated the Appalachians. So anyway, so it is when we get to Diem was out of touch with all of Vietnam. What you had is we wind up, we're supporting the people who were the French collaborationists in a country that was never going to succumb to the French. Right. And so it was a disaster. And so we think, well, we can change Diem and we're going to, somehow be on a better path.
Right. We get someone we would favor us. Right. Yeah.
Right. And it went nowhere. So were the Vietnamese somehow involved with the assassination of Kennedy? I don't think so, but I think that Kennedy's lack of remember, Kennedy with Laos declared, we're going to leave Laos neutral. So neither the communists or the Americans are going to try to make that one of their puppet governments. Right. So we'll leave it neutral. He wanted to do the same thing with Vietnam, leave it neutral. There are people who wanted to fight the communists and wanted to recreate the empires who were against that. So I would see them more in the apparatus that I'm, hypothetically suggesting here as being driven by Vietnam, in addition to other things.
Well, I
really a long-winded answer. I'm sorry for that.
That's okay. I really enjoyed your class, and I hope you teach some other. You said you taught some other history classes. I'd love to go to those too.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Norman?
Yes, I have a question. 5 years later, in 1968, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, was killed in front of a large crowd. Sirhan killed him, and there was no question about that. He was a worker at the Hotel Roosevelt, so essentially nobody. Are there any conspiracy theories there?
Well, look, Sirhan approaches him from the front, yet the bullet that kills Kennedy comes in the back of his head. The bullet that kills Kennedy entered from the back of his head. The FBI, in investigating it, retrieves 11 bullets out of the walls and ceilings and all of that stuff. He had a 6-shooter. So where'd the other, and he didn't reload. He was tackled right away. So where'd the other bullets come from? Never been answered. We don't have ballistics that connects the bullet that killed Kennedy with the weapon that Sirhan had. So yeah, there's a lot of questions about that one too. But they all kind of fit a pattern of lone nuts who are out there.
Enough. You stunned them into silence. So
I'm fine. We can.
In your other class, you kind of pointed out that not only JFK, but Robert Kennedy and MLK all died under suspect.
Yeah, well, look, same thing with MLK. We don't have ballistics that connects the bullet that killed King with the weapon that James Earl Ray used. As an investigator, I look for, the weapon and the bullet that you should be able to connect those two things. I know there's some times where it doesn't work like that, but not 3 out of 3. It's just one aspect of it. And the weapons are always easy to find after the shooting. Oswald's was left conveniently by the exit stairs. Martin Luther King, the weapon is left in a doorway into a place where you have, games going on. Come on, this is, they're following the same script each time. A little variation here, a little variation there, but for all intents and purposes, they're following very similar scripts. So, yeah.
It's just
again, here's the thing. If you can say to yourself, look, I really want to get very wealthy. And if it involves enslaving people, making people live a torturous existence, beating them every day, well, that's okay. If you're okay with that, you're okay with anything. There's no limit. If you can say, look, I really don't want these regulations. I really want the ability, the liberty to poison the air and water and kill people. If you're okay with that, you're okay with anything. If you can, market drugs that are going to addict entire states. There's, understand, you see, normal people try to look at these things through their eyes where they think, well, I wouldn't do that. But it's important for you to know there are people out there who will.
What was your wealth, greed, and power?
That's it. Wealth, greed. And mind you, those things did not exist for the first 200 to 300 years of the existence of our species. It's only the past 10,000 years. So when people say it's human nature, no, it's not.
But it serves somebody's ends.
Well, we've come to the end of this. I hope you all have enjoyed, were entertained. If not enjoyed, entertained.
Yeah.
Engaged and found it interesting.
And our imaginations were piqued.
There you go. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Well, everybody,
Thank you,
thank you
Sal.
for participating. It's been really, I enjoy doing this very much. And
If everyone wants to unmute and give, you know, Sal a little round. of
Thanks,
applause.
Sal. Hey, thank you, Sal.
Thank you.
Happy hands up here.
Excellent, excellent.
And thank you for everyone's time.
Intriguing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a
Fabulous.
great class. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks. And
Bye.
everybody, please be safe out there.
Yeah.